Welcome to the Roundtable Perspective. I'm your host, Tom Roach, and I'm joined today by my guest, Dr. Jennifer Koop. She is an associate professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at Northern Illinois University, and she's here to talk to us about invasive species and invasive parasite species. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So why don't we start off explaining what we mean by these two terms here, right? So what makes something an invasive species?
Sure, it's a good question. And it's a little more complicated than one might think. So when we talk about an invasive species, we're talking about a species that is introduced into an area that it's not normally found. It then establishes a relatively permanent population of reproducing individuals, and it begins to spread from that point of introduction outward. What makes it truly invasive, though, is that it actually has negative impacts on the ecosystem that it's been introduced to. So it's either outcompeting or displacing native species, or in the case of parasites, it's actually infecting those native species.
And by a parasite, we mean what? What constitutes that?
So a parasite is any sort of organism that relies on a host species or a host individual for some portion of its life cycle. It has to get some sort of resource from that host in order for it to survive.
And you've done some research on this, and you've had a couple of publications, so let's start with that.
Yeah. So in my lab, what we study is the ecology and evolution of invasive species, and in particular invasive parasites. We ask really broad sort of umbrella questions like, what is it that allows for some species to be really good at becoming invasive while others fail completely? What is it about the ecology of a certain habitat that might allow for more parasites or more invasive species to actually invade, whereas other habitats are healthy and can resist those sorts of effects?
Yeah.
And so we study it using two different systems in my lab. We have one that's more local here in North America. That's a system that includes an invasive snail species that came from Europe sometime between the 1800 and 1900. That snail is called the faucet snail. It was named because it was so prolific, meaning it was able to reproduce so quickly that it was actually clogging up faucets.
Oh, great.
So that's how it got its name.
How did a snail get over here, by the way?
Great question. So short answer, we don't know. Longer answer is that it likely came over the same way that a whole lot of other invasive species invaded the Great Lakes, which is in ballast water of ships. Yeah. So cargo ships and other big ships, when they take in their cargo, they have to suck in a bunch of water in order to balance the load on top.
Right.
When they do that, because they're taking in so much water, they actually can pull in pretty large organisms, fish, crabs, snails, can all get sucked into that ballast water, and then they go across the ocean, get over into the Great Lakes, offload their cargo, and they have to offload that ballast water.
And that's one of the invasive species that people in Illinois and Indiana might be familiar with, because there's a fish that's in the Great Lakes right now that's causing a problem, right?
We have many.
Well,
Yes.
many, okay.
Yeah, so sea lamprey is maybe the one that you're thinking
Yeah.
of. Sea lamprey are there. Zebra mussels.
Okay.
That's a little
Zebra
tiny
mussels,
crustacean.
I've heard of that too.
Yeah, most of us have heard of zebra mussels. They likely came over in ballast water. And then this faucet snail also is one of those. But the thing that we study in the snail is actually the thing that we're most interested in the snail is actually a parasite that came with that snail. And that's a trematode parasite.
So there's an invasive parasite that comes with an invasive species.
Exactly.
Okay, the
Yep.
trematode.
Yep. So often when we talk about invasive species, we don't think about them coming with parasites or in fact being parasites themselves.
Right.
So that's sort of the caveat and the niche that my lab really focuses on is what do we find, what changes when that invasive species itself is actually a parasite?
Yeah. So you've looked at the trematode, and what else?
Yeah, so the trematode species is of interest in North America because it spends part of its life cycle in these snails, and then when an infected snail gets consumed by a duck, the parasite actually moves into the ducks and finishes its life cycle in those.
And the ducks hate that.
The ducks, unfortunately, are the ones that usually die from that infection.
I see. Yeah.
So that's one system that we study. The other system is in the Galapagos Islands of Ecuador, where we study the avian vampire fly, which has a fun, cool name. But
yeah.
as you can guess probably from the name, it's a parasitic fly that was likely introduced from the mainland into the islands, and it affects Darwin's finches and other land bird species. So it.
Yeah, and this is of particular interest because we've been studying the creatures from that area ever since Darwin, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so the Galapagos are a phenomenal place to study anything related to ecology or evolution because they are an island system, so they're full of endemic species, but they do have simpler communities of organisms than what we might find on a larger mainland like North America.
Yeah, so let's talk about an endemic species. So it's something that is sort of isolated, right, in a particular area, and because it's isolated, it's more vulnerable.
It can be, yeah.
Yes.
So in the case of the Galapagos, a lot of the species there are endemic, which we typically define as they are found only there. So they're found in a very finite part of the Earth.
Which was a gold mine for Darwin. And
Exactly,
and the people on his
exactly.
ship, right?
Yeah, we can get into that. Darwin had kind of a heyday there, but he also made some pretty big mistakes while he was there.
Oh, that'll be another show.
Yeah,
Okay,
there you
we'll
go.
do that. Okay.
But obviously it helped him develop his theory of evolution by natural selection. So endemic species are a little bit more at risk because they're found in these finite areas. So the thing is, if something sweeps into the Galapagos and takes out those different populations, say of Darwin's finch species, we can't find them anywhere else on Earth. There's no other place to introduce them back from.
Yeah, they're gone forever.
Exactly.
And you study the pathways in particular, right?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do in my lab is trying to recreate the invasion pathways for these organisms. Often with invasive species, we don't know. We might know where we think they came from because we know where else they're found on the planet, but we don't know necessarily when they arrived in that new place or how and when they spread from that original location or point of introduction.
Yeah.
And so in my lab, we use population genetics tools where we use DNA sequences essentially to map out how related any particular populations of species are to one another, and then we can recreate these invasion pathways to say, well, this was likely introduced from, we can say the Netherlands in Europe into the US, and then it traveled through the Great Lakes, and it split off from the Great Lakes over to the Mississippi, et cetera, et cetera.
So when we're going through customs, as we move back and forth between countries when we're traveling, right, and they're looking to see if we brought some tea with us or something like that, right, or if we walked through a field, right, that's what they're checking for.
That's exactly what they're checking for, is invasive species. Yeah, so when they, if you've ever traveled to New Zealand, they're some of the best at checking for those sorts of things. So they will check the soles of your shoes to see if there are seeds stuck in there. When you go to the Galapagos, there's a number of different measures you go through where they spray sort of an insecticide within the plane trying to get rid of any hitchhikers and things like that.
I guess it kind of gets us off subject for a second here, but I mean, this almost seems like this is inevitable. I mean, aren't we just going to end up with a, homogeneous environment here at some point, no matter what we do?
It's a very fair question, and it's one that I actually get asked somewhat often. I think it's important to recognize the part we play in introducing invasives, and we can certainly change the role that we play in that. So by moving ourselves and all of our stuff around the planet as much as we do, it's very easy for invasive species to be introduced into new places. But the more aware we become of the likelihood of that, the easier it is for us to stop it and slow that potential homogenization.
So let me ask you, what does globalization mean to you then, given your area of study here?
I guess I would say globalization is fraught with some serious threats in terms of introducing parasites into completely naive host populations. And when we talk about naive host populations, it's just hosts who haven't seen that parasite before. So they've in no way evolved with it. We saw that with the COVID pandemic. That was essentially an invasive parasite or pathogen sweeping through new populations of hosts. And so when we talk about globalization, we are talking about the threat of that happening over and over and over again.
And so throughout history, there have been a number of events like this, right? The one that comes to mind is the rabbits in Australia, right? Somebody, the story I heard is that someone brought them in because he wanted to hunt them.
Yeah, I think that is.
And they've taken over the continent, basically.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's true. There's something called a rabbit-proof fence that goes across the.
Yeah. The efficacy of it is probably a little bit debated, but yes, they tried to use a fence to control it.
Did it work?
It kind of worked and then kind of didn't work.
Yeah.
They actually are using a parasite to try to control the rabbits.
We're fighting back. We're fighting fire with fire.
We're fighting fire with fire.
Oh, that's good.
That is often how it goes with invasive species.
So what are some other major examples of invasive species, just to make this a little more salient?
Yeah, so if I think of examples that folks might recognize, even in their backyard, if we talk about the Great Lakes region, we've got, the Asian carp, we have zebra mussels. Other invasive species that you might see, up on land are the Asian ladybird beetles, those little orange beetles that we see that look like ladybugs.
They're not really ladybirds.
But they're not
I've heard
ladybugs.
that.
Yep, those are an invasive species that were introduced into California and have spread. Folks a little more south to us have had to deal with the fire ant, which is a global invader that has really managed to spread throughout the world. But then there are more common animals too. Things like rats and domestic cats are considered invasive species because they've been moved into places.
So the family cat is an invasive species?
The family cat is an invasive species.
Wow. Is there some, study that's been done on its impact on the environment or anything?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think we want them to have an impact on the environment, right? We want them to kill all the mice.
Maybe in your house, that'd be great if they killed all of the mice. The problem is when those cats go outside, they kill other things, particularly birds. So domestic cats that are outdoor cats, allowed to be outdoor cats and aren't fitted with like a bell or things like that, are actually responsible for over, I think it's close to 1 billion bird deaths annually.
Oh, no kidding.
So they are one of the largest killers of bird species.
But, birds are one of the largest killers of bird species too, right? Are the cats really that much of a problem?
They really are. They really are. They are having a much more dramatic impact on bird species than any sort of natural predation levels.
That's interesting. So any other historical examples for us? I know, this is probably something that we live with more in America than they do in Europe, right? Because people came to North and South America from all over.
Yeah, that's a good thought. It is something that we are probably a little more aware of, given the age of our country. We have a better idea of what was here sort of before we arrived versus after, and more longer established countries, meaning where people have been present for longer periods of time, that's a little bit harder to discern. We certainly see a lot of examples of invasive species within island systems. Because they have those simplified ecosystems, it's easier to get full tabs on the species that are present and then recognize when an invasive species is suddenly introduced.
So there's talk about malaria and mosquitoes bearing malaria in the U.S. right now. What do you know about that?
Yeah, so we've seen little preludes of this in the U.S. So if you remember Zika virus sort of rearing its head a few years ago, mosquitoes are native in North America to some degree, but there are plenty of species that are here now in much higher numbers than they've ever been, and there are other species that have been introduced outright. They were never present in North America.
So there's not just the mosquito, there's like a whole class of mosquitoes, right?
Yes, many different species of mosquitoes, and many of them vector parasites and pathogens, one of them being a plasmodium parasite that can cause malaria, another being a parasite that can cause Zika virus. That poses some pretty serious threats because we are introducing these parasites into, again, populations of hosts that have never had to deal with them, a medical system that is not used to looking for them, and so it can cause a lot of problems.
And Lyme disease is another one, right?
Lyme disease is one that we are particularly conscientious of here in the Midwest. So Lyme disease is caused by a parasite that is found in tick species, in particular deer tick species.
And ticks, like the mosquito, of course, are getting into your bloodstream, right?
The ticks don't get into your bloodstream, but the parasite that they harbor gets into your bloodstream.
Okay.
Yep. So when they feed on you, they're transmitting that parasite into your bloodstream.
Let's also define parasite.
Sure. So parasites are organisms that depend on a host for some sort of resource. They either spend part of their life cycle on or in that host, or they have to get food from that host. Different examples include things like tick species, mosquitoes. We've all had to deal with mosquitoes. So when they come and take a blood meal from you, that's an act of parasitism. Any of us with kiddos live in constant fear of head lice. Those are examples of parasites.
Yeah. Your specialty is aquatic parasites, I understand, right?
Yeah, that's certainly one of the systems that we study is with aquatic parasites.
So tell us about some interesting examples from that.
Sure, of other aquatic parasite
yeah.
species. But other aquatic parasite species, so if we go back to that sea lamprey, they're actually one of the best known
Like what is that?
Parasite species. They are the things of nightmares. So sea lamprey are like giant leeches to some degree. So they can get really large.
Really?
And they have...
I'm surprised nobody's made a movie.
Oh, somebody has. There's a new Sharknado coming out that'll have sea lamprey in
So
it.
seriously, how big do they get?
I don't know their maximum size, but I know that they can get well over a foot. And the head of them, the mouth of them, is just this open, gaping hole
You're
of
making
teeth.
this up.
I promise I am not.
Wow.
So the way that they parasitize other things is they latch onto the sides of fish, and they basically just start sucking blood and other fluids out of the fish.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And is there one coming to a city near me? I mean, is this?
They are here. They are throughout the Great Lakes
is that
to
right?
some degree. Yeah.
Okay, but they won't attack people.
There are a lot of efforts to remove them, and that's been going on for a long time. And many of the efforts have actually been quite successful to reduce their populations down to where they have a hard time finding one another to mate, and so their populations kind of crash for a while. But
I see. Well, they're not something that people are normally going to see then, right? Because they're just preying on fish, and they're probably pretty far below
they're pretty
the
rare
surface.
that you would. Yeah, I don't think humans swimming in the Great Lakes need to be too concerned about being attacked by a sea lamprey just yet.
And then I want to go back to the snails for a minute. You said they were like clogging up faucets, so they got into the water system
They're
in the
the
cities?
waterways, yeah. So in the same way, so zebra mussels are notorious for this.
So but I thought my water was like pure and clean.
Well, so zebra mussels actually did a really good job at cleaning up the water, almost to too good of a degree. So they took food away from other native mussel species.
Yeah.
But they're notorious for overloading infrastructure like bridges and other things like that. They attach themselves through these little fibrous threads to our structures, and they become so heavy that they can actually pull these bridges and other things down. Faucet snails haven't done that to this point, but I think the zebra mussel largely cleared the way for faucet snails to be able to come in and reproduce in these really high numbers. And because they can creep kind of into different waterways, they can actually get into our, even our homes in terms of clogging up faucets and things like that. Certainly if you're more rural.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, is there a societal impact here? I mean, do they affect us more than just in these individual little ways here? Is there an overall impact?
Yeah, so invasive species in general are considered sort of the second leading cause in biodiversity decline. So we talk about, Jared Diamond coined this term called the 4 horsemen of the ecological apocalypse.
Okay, good.
And those 4 are...
Number 1 is people, maybe?
Number 1 is habitat loss.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Largely caused by people. You'll find that all 4 of these
they're all
have
caused by
links to
people. Okay.
So habitat loss is the leading one. Yeah. Invasive species is second, though. So then we have things like overexploitation or the overharvesting of a resource, and then climate change. But that invasive species one is really important. So we are in a biodiversity crisis, at the moment, where we see a rapid decline in the number of species on the planet, and it's quite alarming, the rate of it. And invasive species being the second leading cause of it mean that they're very worthy of our attention and research and study.
It seems to me this is kind of like climate change in that I don't really notice on a day-to-day basis that the climate's changing, and I don't really notice that any species has disappeared in the course of my lifetime, right? But if you're tracking this, I guess you're seeing a significant change going on around us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, most of us day to day are only aware of so many species that are around us. Right. But when you start to focus in on any particular group, even birds, if you just focus on birds, we've seen massive declines in the numbers of species at least in terms of their full ranges, where they're found, that may be shrinking, or the actual species themselves. So one example that I often give is in Hawaii, there used to be, I'm going to forget the exact number now, but a number of different endemic honeycreeper bird species that were essentially all wiped out with the introduction of mosquitoes, rats, cats, a number of different
the villainous
invasive
cats
species.
again. Yes.
The cats come back.
So I mentioned climate change. I imagine that's a factor here, right?
Yeah. In my lab in particular, we don't focus that much on climate change, but it is certainly something that we have to consider in our understanding of how likely these parasites are to affect host populations. If they're already, if the host populations being affected are already sort of under the thumb because of habitat loss, and climate change maybe driving some of that habitat loss or degradation, and then you add invasive species to the mix, that may be the fatal combination.
Well, I'm wondering too if it doesn't sometimes cause the spread, because you could have maybe a species that thrives in one area because of a temperature, and as that temperature maybe shifts, right, then the species shifts with it, right? And
exactly, yeah, you hit it right on the head. So talking about those mosquito examples that we did earlier, that were introducing things like Zika or malaria or various other diseases, some of those species are here only because the temperatures in North America have steadily increased, making way for those.
And population growth would be another factor, I would imagine.
Human population growth?
Yeah.
Certainly, as we continue to grow in size, we continue to push into new places that we've not been before, which exposes us to the species and organisms in those places, and it exposes those species and organisms to us.
To the parasites that we're carrying to them, right?
It's a two-way trade at all times.
Yeah, well. So on another topic here, I know that you're interested in working with high school students and grade school students, and you recently received an NSF grant to do more outreach to inspire young children and teach them about the scientific process. Tell me about that.
Yeah, this is really exciting work. We really love this in my lab. So we received a National Science Foundation grant to be able to do a lot of that snail work that I've talked about.
Yeah.
And a huge component of that grant had to do with outreach. So what we have is our students, our undergraduates at NIU, serve as mentors to 7th grade students in the local community, so in DeKalb and Genoa.
Yeah.
And they go into the schools over the course of a 2-week program. They work with these students to develop a hypothesis related to the snail system.
Yeah.
So we ask them to come up with a hypothesis about what sort of environmental factors might affect the spread of snails. And they come up with fantastic things. So things like temperature. Maybe the snails move faster in warm temperature or cold temperatures. And then they actually get to set up, they design experiments with kiddie pools where they put snails in and see how far they go in their different conditions. They get to collect the data on campus, analyze it, and then present their work. So we get to teach them about scientific communication as well.
That's great.
It's fantastic for all involved.
Have you thought about sending them into the woods with nets and flashlights?
I'd love to. I would love to. Maybe next year.
They won't let you do that, I'm sure. So those are middle school students mostly then, right?
Yeah, so it's Northern Illinois University undergraduate students mentoring 7th grade students.
Yeah. So this is hopefully having an impact on our understanding of science and on generating new scientists who will study this in the future. Right?
Yeah, we hope that we are training future generations of scientists.
That's good. So getting back to the invasive species and the invasive parasites area, is there anything that's of particular interest in Illinois and Indiana right now, since that's most of our audience?
Yeah, so if we talk about a parasite in particular, we have the Lone Star tick creeping into both of these locations. And the Lone Star tick, again, can vector a number of different parasites that can affect humans or pets or cattle, things like that. And so that is certainly one that is on the radar of many researchers in this area.
And that's a threat because obviously you don't want ticks, but the ticks by themselves are an annoyance, but yes.
Yeah, the parasites that they can vector can be life-threatening to humans under some conditions.
I'm getting nervous having this conversation with you here. I'm just wondering, how has this affected you to know about all these things? Do you think about this all the time? Do you?
Good question.
Does it make you more
careful?
careful?
First of all, I'm very impressed you haven't once done this when talking about ticks or anything. So
now that you mentioned it, yeah.
It has certainly made me more aware as I travel around to different places thinking about whether or not I'm likely to be moving species with me and how I can best take care of myself, my things, to ensure that I'm not helping to facilitate the introduction of any other species.
So you think, to some extent, then, even the average person can have some impact on this if they're being a little more careful?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you go boating, clean your boat before you move it from one lake to another. If you go hiking, clean your shoes off before you go from one trail to the other.
Really? Oh,
Yep, that has a massive impact.
Yeah, and maybe when we're going through the airports, right, be a little more diligent.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yep.
What about taking food with us and things like that?
Yeah, you should always try to avoid moving any sort of seeds or plants or fruits between locations if at all possible.
Yeah, I like to eat on the plane. This might be a problem for me. That's all the time we have for our program. Thank you to Dr. Jennifer Koop for joining me today on the Roundtable Perspective. I'm Tom Roach. See you next time.